Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Praedel. I'm Executive Director here at Community Homeworks. We're so glad you're here this afternoon on this gloomy Thursday afternoon to hopefully provide a bright spot, talk about housing here in our community and all the great things to come. We have launched this Let's Talk Housing series, and this is actually our third episode. And what we've done is we've tried to work on the different types of issues and questions that the community has reached out to us to ask about in recent months. And we are using these videos to create a resource bank. So when people call and ask us, hey, I heard about this Housing for All millage, and I know I voted on it last November. How can I share input about it? Or how can I take advantage of it for my family? Because we were facing housing insecurity. We have the ability to share a resource with them that they can watch and learn a little bit more about it before they reach out to someone. So we're glad you're here. We hope you find this informative and helpful. And we're excited today to welcome our latest guest, Mary Balkema, who is the Housing Director at Kalamazoo County. And thank you, Mary, so much for joining us today. We're so glad you're here. And just to kind of give a little intro to Mary here before we get started. So Mary has a long history in public service here in our community. Was actually a city commissioner starting in 2001, was appointed to become the treasurer of Kalamazoo County in 2007, and served there from 2007 to 2020. Helped form, was very instrumental to creating the land bank and so many other things that worked on as projects in our community. And so, we're glad you're here, Mary, and to provide some background and insight into your new role as housing director. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for the invite. I'm very excited.
Yeah, for sure. So one of our goals here today is just to help those who are watching and those that we eventually share this with, to share a little bit of information about the Housing for All millage that voters passed in the November 2020 election here in Kalamazoo County. So again, just keeping in mind that this is Kalamazoo County. That was a Kalamazoo County-wide millage beyond just the scope of the city of Kalamazoo. And as we go through here, for each of our guests on here, we like to give a little bit of personality to each of our guests and just learn a little bit about the individuals who are behind housing. And so I have a couple questions for you related to that, but I'll start off just saying, how did you become involved in the housing space? How did that become an interest or passion for you?
Sure. So, Chris, I have walked every single street in the city, many streets in the county, just probably like you have. And I saw the older housing stock, some of the stock on the north side that was really built into the muck. We used to grow celery there, and they had crumbled basements or Michigan basements, or the houses really weren't functional. And when I became the treasurer and formed the land bank, we put a lot of money into blight to really decreasing that housing stock. And it was always our dream that the private market would follow us with new housing stock. But, there's an appraisal gap between the cost of construction and what it's going to appraise for in an urban city. So it's long been a passion of mine that urban cities need density. And where do you get density? With housing stock. And what does that look like? And so you don't really want to go down the street and see house, an empty lot, right? Where one's been torn down, house. And so what should our strategy be for an infill strategy? And with that passion, I formed the land bank. We did about $30 million in development. We were the largest builder in the city in the downturn of 2008. And so many of our projects, you can see, we did Prairie Gardens, we did Marketplace, we did Scattered Site, we did a lot of rehabs. And so I'm really proud of that work. And this is just kind of a continuation of that passion. I won't be removing blight, but I've already done about $6 million of that. And so that really is a strategy for multifamily, single family, and every type of housing that you can think of.
I know you were really instrumental, and one of the bright spots that I'm really proud of is the tax foreclosure initiative in the city of Kalamazoo, and having zero tax foreclosed homes or whatnot. I know you were pretty intimately involved with that, and so I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that at all, that program and how you got involved with that.
The city, Stephanie Moore actually came to me, Commissioner Stephanie Moore, and she's like, could we have no tax foreclosures on the north side? So one year, me and Stephanie went door to door and we piloted it in the north side. And then the city commission said, Mary, could you do that in the entire city? Well, it took me to go door to door a second time. And so the mayor, Bobby Hopel at the time, joined me, and Vice Mayor David Anderson, and we had 0 tax foreclosures.
Wow.
And we were one of the only counties in the state to have that on owner occupied. And then we got a generous contribution from the city through the Foundation for Excellence, a grant to help folks. But then a private donor in another county gave me money so I could help everyone in the county avoid tax foreclosure.
Wow.
So I think when you're doing good work and you talk about it, people will come forward because this really is a generous community.
Yeah, for sure. Kind of looking back on your career and everything, can you talk a little bit about like how it came to be where like this, becoming housing director was kind of like the next thing for you, like the next step, in your career and how that came to be?
Sure. So when the millage renewal came up, we had levied 0.1 mill. And every time we have a millage and it's too little, everyone is at the food trough scrapping for the same money.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what if we asked for 0.75 mills and we could really have an impact? Mm-hmm. And so I was on the steering committee and I'm like, what if everyone could have housing? And what if we could really expand our services? What would that look like? Mm-hmm. So I didn't work on the millage, obviously, because I was working on my own campaign. So I was kind of in the background. But then when it passed, I said to the administrator, I think if we worked on it before the money came, it would be a lot better than to have the money come and then hire someone and scramble to see what it looked like. Mm-hmm. And so we posted a position and, we interviewed far and wide and put it out there, and they did choose me. So I'm very grateful. And of course, I know a lot about this community. I've seen a lot at the street level. And so I have a pretty good view of what needs to happen.
Yeah, for sure. And so the amount levied, so it's 7.115 million is the estimation for the county once that's levied. And so it'll start being levied later this year, so late 2021. Voters obviously passed that in November. We wouldn't be here having this conversation if it didn't. But what does that mean for the residents of our county? I mean, now that this is passed, what does it look like for them?
So I get a lot of phone calls saying, hey, I'm homeless. Will you help me find housing? So the county is not a housing provider. The county is going to be a funder with our private developers and our nonprofit infrastructure to help folks. HRI is the entry point if you need housing. And so we're still encouraging folks to use the infrastructure that we have. And so hopefully what this millage will do is to build more housing, scattered site, multifamily, every type of housing available, and increase the services, and so that we can get folks rapid rehousing.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So how do you anticipate the housing, I guess the whole housing scene, and especially like housing insecurity, like how do you envision that changing, as we start to see a few years under our belt with the housing for all millage? I mean, do you see, significant changes? Do you think it'll be kind of slow going at first, but, transformative over time? What do you think?
I think it certainly will be transformative over time. And the solution to homelessness is housing, right? That's the solution. Not everyone that is homeless is jobless. If you look on the county's website, we have job postings every single week. We have janitors that start at $11.43 an hour. If you take 30% of that as for housing, they can't afford to live anywhere in the county. They cannot afford to live. So we have employees, and the city probably does too, that can't afford a rental place in the county. So it's a problem, right? It's a big problem. And FedEx just came here with $15 an hour jobs. That's roughly $32,000 a year, 30% of that on housing. They're going to be challenged to find housing. And so what we're really talking about is affordable housing. We're not talking about cheap housing. We're talking about affordable housing that me and you would be proud of to have our name on it and our tax dollars to go to. And right now, the cost of construction is very expensive. And so this is not a cheap proposition. This is an expensive endeavor.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I know there was the public comment opportunity with the Kalamazoo County Commission, and you've been, undertaking like an extensive input process from the community and from service providers and from houseless individuals or if people facing housing insecurity, and you're continuing to do that work. But can you share a little bit about like what generally are you hearing from people, and then kind of as a piggyback off of that, how can people still provide input if they have ideas or thoughts at all about how the millage should be utilized?
Sure. We had an extensive input process. We had a link on our website, calcounty.com/housing. We had about 200 people give public input. I think that's a lot. It was wide and varied. We heard from disability resources that a lot of times the houses are not visitable or they're not easily adaptable to accommodate someone with a disability. So I thought that was very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
I took the fair housing training. The number one issue for folks is disability, discrimination because of disability. So that resonated loud and clear. We've also heard that people want to age in place. That's important to some folks. They love their neighborhood. We also heard that design standards are important. Energy efficiency is important. So I think when you take all of the community input, then the commissioners will determine what they want, their dollars to go to. So I think it was very good, very wide, very varied, and I sent it to you. I thought it was good. I was very encouraged by the comment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, very helpful. And then in terms of reaching, if anybody still wants to provide input or share some perspective, whether they're a practitioner or somebody that is experiencing housing themselves or lack of housing themselves, your contact information is scrolling across the bottom. Is that the best way for people to reach out with any feedback here at this phase?
Absolutely. And okay. I will make it on a spreadsheet and give it all to the commissioners. We're having our housing forum on May 15. And so we are absolutely reading and taking everyone's feedback seriously. And if you take the time to give us feedback, we know that it's important.
Mm-hmm. And if people want to just learn more just about the millage in general or about, your office and whatnot, is the best way just to go through that calcounty.com/housing? Is that the best route to do that? Okay. Great.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So we were talking a little bit about this before we came on live, but, in terms of any impact that you think that the pandemic has had on the housing space or specifically housing here in our community, do you mind sharing, just some of your personal perspective about how you think that the pandemic has maybe impacted things immediately, but might impact things for potentially years to come?
Sure. I think that COVID has exacerbated an already critical need in our community. And as we talked about, the cost of OSB lumber has tripled. And so, with the increase of the cost, it's added about $35,000 to housing. And that a single lot in the county, not the city, costs about $60,000. So if we wanted to make it affordable to folks 30, 60, it's going to be a huge subsidy. And so that's not lost on anyone, what that gift or what that subsidy looks like, right? Mm-hmm. So it's hard. And with the increased cost, you get a decreased quantity, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of $1 million sounds like a lot. But if you look at the project on Portage and Lake Street, the creamery, that's $14 million in 5 years in the making. Right. So multi-units don't happen fast. Housing doesn't go up overnight. And even if we could start today, our first unit probably wouldn't be up until December. So, the trades are busy. There's a backlog. There's a backlog of materials. So we're starting in a difficult time in history.
Just from Community Works perspective, we certainly were impacted by the shutdown and doing work in people's homes. But, since the shutdown, since we tried to get back and safely do work in individuals' homes with critical home repairs, it's been, very interesting for us to adapt because, as you can imagine, before the vaccine was available and people were fully vaccinated, there were a lot of people that were faced with the decision, like, do I do I want to do this repair, or do I want to potentially expose myself by having somebody, come into my home and, potentially contract COVID? And so a lot of, especially individuals who are seniors, ignored issues for a long period of time. And so what would have maybe been a $250 couple hour plumbing call, turned into a 5,000 plus repair job that's far more complicated, that now requires 3 subcontractors to come in to do the work. And so we actually started to see really compounded issues in a lot of homes because people avoided calling for help, even though they knew we were who to call. And in a lot of cases, the person would call for help, and then we were just trying to figure out, why is it taking so long to get the application back? And as we would start to ask why, in a lot of cases we would find out that reason, that they just had they knew that they needed to do the work, so they figured they'd get started on the paperwork, but they weren't comfortable having somebody to come into their home. And then for a lot of homeowners, the barriers of filling out all the federal funded paperwork, if you had to go to the Social Security office, you had to make an appointment, and they had limited hours. Your financial institution, if you need to go get banking records, you couldn't go to the library to print anything off. Public transportation was kind of sidetracked for a while. And so, we found that it took significantly longer for people to return paperwork in these critical situations. And, so it's been interesting to see how just the societal impacts during the pandemic, and, how we're still going to be seeing some of the toll for that for a little while in terms of the work that we even just do as one organization. And then you mentioned it, the subcontractors has been a huge issue for us because, as the federal stimulus dollars have rolled into households, a lot of moderate to upper income households are, they're not going on vacation. They're not, spending it going out to dinner. And so a lot of those families are building a new deck or, renovating the bathroom. And so, we'll call an electrician and, be told that we can't get there for 3 to 4 weeks. And, if you're a person calling with a critical repair, it means that you have an existing or imminent health or safety risk. And so it's really been a challenging time for us as an organization to pivot and adjust and figure out how to do it. But we know we're not alone in that. We know that in the whole housing space, everybody's seeing, unique challenges and having to adapt as best as they can. But yeah, so it's definitely interesting for sure. Speaking of barriers to access, we sometimes refer to it as like the endless or the endless referral loop, or the referral loop, where somebody's trying to get help with services and keep getting referred to the next person and then the next person, and just keep getting passed around like a hot potato. And then sometimes after getting passed along through many people, find themselves kind of exasperated at the end and realize that they've hit a dead end. And for our team, it's one of the hardest calls that we can get when we know we can't help them, and know that there's not a lot of great options to share with them to get help. And so one of the things that we do is we do provide navigation support services and try to get people to the right resource. But I'm just kind of curious in terms of, ones that you're aware of, or like gaps that you hear about that you think that we as a community need to figure out a way to tackle. What are some of the gaps that exist currently in services for housing, or housing gaps, I guess?
Well, I think some of the gaps are some of the more expensive repairs that folks need. A new roof, for instance. When we let out money for that type of thing, there's only a very small amount of folks that we can help. And if you go down the street, you can see that that's probably a major issue.
Mm-hmm.
Or the issues of rodent infestation or bed bugs. There's not really a pot of money. And so that can really hamper folks. I've also seen excessive garbage, and if you get your garbage service turned off, then you start putting all that stuff in your basement. So it's some of those basic services that me and you take for granted. For some folks, it's a real barrier. And so if we had a bit of money to get people on their feet and those services paid and up to date, I think it really would change the quality of life for folks. Or, the winter's cold in Michigan, and new windows, sometimes that's really a necessity to lower those utility costs.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no doubt. Well, and sometimes as well, with the federal funding structures as well, there might be kind of unique housing situations where it might be a clear title issue, and it might take several months to get it resolved. But if you don't have a clear title and your furnace goes out in January, well, and if the federal funding requires you to be the homeowner listed on the title, well, that's a problem, or, for a number of land contract owners, people who are in floodplains, those sort of things. And all those definitely, seem to be ones that we hear about for sure, that can be challenging to get resources to, for sure.
If your title is clouded, you know what? We have expedited clear title through the land bank. We have the judge that is very willing to help folks through the process because
Cool.
it's about equity, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have clear title to your house, you really don't own it. And there
Right.
is a way. Maybe you need to go through the probate court. But
Yeah.
there's a path. The city's helping folks and paying for the attorney. I just helped someone this week.
Yeah.
And so if that's really your issue, you do need to reach out.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's good. That's great to lift that up. In terms of, we've maybe spoken a little bit about this, but in terms of just like greatest challenges that you think that we face as a community when it comes to housing, I mean, what would you say are the top things that come to mind for you?
I would say it's the lack of units, the lack of affordable units. We have an older housing stock, right? And so that needs critical repair. I think those are two of the major ones. If you are homeless right now, there is no place to go. We have folks living in their cars. We have folks doubled up. We have folks in hotels. We have folks in tents. And some folks aren't there because they want to be. It is because of the lack of affordable units. We are about 5,000 units short, 3,000 in the city, about 2,000 in the rest of the county. We know we are short on affordable units.
Yeah, for sure. That's helpful. So just to kind of wrap up, is there anything that you particularly would want to make sure to share that maybe I didn't ask about housing or about the millage or about your role or anything like that you wanted to lift up or share? I have some fun questions to ask as well, so they're not all so serious.
Well, I think Kalamazoo County is on a great trajectory in housing. There's no other county in the state that is doing what we're doing. There is no county that has passed a millage. And so I think with the vision, with the money, with planning, with experience, and with partners, because we can honestly do great things. And so that gives me hope. And that also, you know what, when we help one family, it's just one family at a time. It builds wealth for them. It builds our tax base. It builds community. It builds stability. And so all of those things really gladdens my heart. And I wake up every day excited about them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I see what we've done even just in the last 6 months related to housing. I would definitely include the Housing for All millage in that. It's exciting to think about, what we can look like, say 10 years from now, in terms of a community. And I think we certainly have a lot of really, gems to point to that people can look to. But, I really hope that people can look at the city of Kalamazoo and certainly the county and point to it as like, geez, how did they do that? Pointing to us and saying like, how can we replicate that in our communities or in our counties? And I really am optimistic and hopeful that we can become that community that people look to.
And I would add, Harrison Circle's coming on board later this year, and there's an application process, and they do have affordable units targeting folks at 30% or below of area median income. Mm-hmm. So if anyone needs help filling out those applications, that help is available as well. But you know what? Before they come on, I would have my application ready so folks are picked and ready to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I believe, is that 80 units, if I'm not mistaken? Harrison Circle, yeah, it's impressive.
It's very impressive, and there's efficiency units, there's 1 bedroom, and there's a couple 2-bedroom. But I think the faster you get your application completed and into the office, the better your chances are of getting one of the units.
Yeah, for sure. So on to some fun questions here for you. So just being a native Kalamazoo leader, so who is your Kalamazoo hero, Shiro, if you will, someone that you most look up to or admire?
So I really admire people who are kind and generous and have a servant leadership heart. And I also really admire people who grow where they're planted. And one hero lives on my street. It's Ed Fletcher. He has lived in Kalamazoo his whole life. He started RX Optical. He's 80 something years old. He still is passionate about the city. He just built a brand new office apartment across from D&W. And so I just always admire people who are willing to give me good advice any stretch of the way, who have roots deep here and love the city. So when you asked me that question, he was the first person that came to my mind, but I have a lot of heroes that have served this community with their whole heart.
Yeah,
Zadie
for sure.
Jackson is another one who pours love into me and gives me her insight on housing. But there are a lot of people who really are kind and generous with their time.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely no shortage of those individuals here in Kalamazoo. Favorite place to eat in Kalamazoo?
I really like the Crow's Nest. I've never had a bad meal. Anyone who wants to go out for breakfast with me, we can share a meal. They give plenty of food. I always have a full belly, and their food is always really tasty and really great.
Yes, no doubt. If you had a day off in Kalamazoo, what would you do with your time?
You know, Kalamazoo has nice trails and nice parks. I would hike or I would garden. I love to garden. I love beautiful things. And so I would hike or garden.
I think I know the answer to this, but introvert or extrovert?
I'm probably an extrovert.
That sounds about fair.
Yeah.
Leadership philosophy.
I like to lead by example. And so I would never ask you to do something that I wasn't willing to do myself. And I like to build a team, and I like to include a lot of input to make decisions. And so I think that the best leaderships are servant leaders that lead by example.
Very good. And then these are two complete the sentence responses. So Kalamazoo is best at blank.
Having a lot of amenities for being a small town.
Best kept secret in Kalamazoo is blank.
Is the mummy at the museum.
I haven't thought about that in a long time, but yeah, you're right.
I love the mummy. I've seen the mummy when it was the old museum, and then the mummy made its way to the new museum, and I think the mummy's great, and I think the mummy's so great that I'm going to Egypt this year to see the pyramids and to see the pharaohs. Well, you can't see them, but maybe I'll see another mummy, right?
Yeah, very cool. Well, Mary, thank you so much.
The best kept secret is the Five Senses Garden next to Phoenix High School on Oakland Drive. And if you've never been there, you have to go. It is absolutely cool. So it's things that the five senses, you can touch, you can see, you can smell, you can hear, and it's a perfect echo chamber. And the things that you can taste, you can actually eat what's in the garden.
Wow. That's so cool.
You have to go there if you have never been.
Cool. I have never been. Yeah, we'll have to check that out.
Called the Five Senses Garden.
All right. Good to know. I feel like over the course of 12 months of these episodes, we're going to learn some pretty cool little hidden gems for people to hang out and find out about. Well, Mary, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you being here, and appreciate your continued service. And we look forward to staying in touch with you for sure, and let Community Homeworks know if we can ever be a resource for sure. So
thank you so much, and thanks for all you do for the community. Appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, thanks, Mary. Appreciate you. All right, well, that about wraps it up for us today. We thank Mary again for being our guest today. We were joined by Vice Mayor Patrice Griffin the month previous, and the month previous to that, we shared a little bit about information about Community Homeworks. We're going to be joined next month by Executive Director of the Kalamazoo Literacy Council, Michael Evans, who's going to share resources available to adults and families related to literacy, and a lot of the great projects that they have going on and working on, and the countless resources they offer to Kalamazoo County as well. So we hope to see you next time when we meet for Let's Talk Housing. In the meantime, if you want to learn about Community Homeworks, the work we do, we provide critical home repairs to our low-income neighbors here, right in our backyard here in Kalamazoo. We also, one of the things I'm incredibly proud of is the work that we do to provide maintenance and repair education, which has been moved entirely virtual, but we actually have an education lab in the Edison neighborhood at our headquarters at 810 Bryant, and we can't wait for the day that we can come back together to do hands-on instruction. But we are so proud of that work, and would encourage you to check out our bank of episodes that teach all sorts of useful tips and tricks and repair know-how at our YouTube page, or also here on the same Facebook page as well for our organization. So feel free to check us out at communityhomeworks.org. And thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day.